Good morning. Much better. Today I don't have to repeat twice. You're becoming a very, very good church. Listen, this week was no exception to other weeks. It's always a mixture of sentiment. You know, we closed the week with some sad news of one of our daughters. She was in church for a long, long time, very long time. She was a student at UCT. And she also brought a big sister in church. So very excited, when she got the second daughter called. Her dad, God have blessed us, we have a second daughter. And then, was it the day before yesterday or yesterday? The day before yesterday. So we got a report from Pastor Dominic that they went to sleep, and then the father woke up to check on the children. The second born was dead, sleeping. So it's pain, and then we need to pray. I think Melody have gone to Zim. The burial was yesterday. So those are terrible things that happen. And then yesterday as well, Norby, finally they got married after a lengthy period of time of will it happen, not. So it's just this thing of, the good and the ugly mixed, and that life on earth. So today we want to turn, I told you in January, we will look a lot throughout the year in the life of Joseph, because that's the primary source for our conversation around 2023 on the Year of Plenty. So, and I will encourage you as well, if you can get back in the habit of writing, you will thank me one day. So smartness is about taking your life seriously. No one has a strong memory that you just gobble everything and memorize. Just being, and then technology have made it easier. We don't say write verbatim, word for word, but there could be a sentence, could be a word, could be a key that comes. Jot it down. Put a date. On such a day, God said this to me, and then begin to meditate on it. You never know. That's how you mature as a child of God. Now, there are many cycles, as I told you, in the book of Genesis. And the longest of all the cycles, as you call them, is the cycle of Joseph. Joseph have taken inordinate amount of chapters. And then if you're a Bible student, every time the Bible consecrates any length of writings to an individual, to a character, to a subject, heaven is trying to say, pay attention. So when you read the cycle of Joseph, you start in chapter 37, where we introduced to a 17-year-old boy who's a teenager with dreams, so receiving visions from above, and then getting into trouble at the tender age, and then it starts building until we go to Genesis 50, which is the conclusion of Genesis. It concludes with the story of Joseph. So it's a lot of reading and study. So one of the reasons why the cycle of Joseph is so prominent, because Joseph is a type of Jesus. There's a lot, parallelism between Joseph and Jesus, a lot, just way too much that we can study. So Joseph was the beloved child of his dad. Jesus was the beloved child of God. Joseph was given a coat of dignity. Jesus was anointed with a coat of dignity, and it can go on and on and on and on in that manner. Then you begin to build, like any story, until it crescendos. Chapter 45 probably is the crescendo of the story of Joseph. So we're gonna look into chapter 45 and then just draw some few things And then I'm thinking, how can I summarize this chapter 45? So 3 things or movements come to mind, and then we will, discuss about it. 1, the story of Joseph is a beautiful story. That's something that you're going to look into. It's a beautiful story. But the second thing that you learn, it's a beautiful story wrapped in bad situation. Exactly as our lives are. The grace of God carries us. We are saved, but our lives are wrapped in bad situations more than once. And it's those situations that happen that either they push us closer to God or further from God. They drive us to be closer to other human beings, or we make decisions, never again. We are all at that place. And then the third thing you study is it's not just a beautiful story wrapped in a bad situation, but it requires a bold or brave solution. You cannot wish problems away. You have to confront them. So those are things that you're going to be leading. I learn a lot from my wife. Even at our age, I'm still learning. By nature, I am averse to problems. I don't like them at all. When I live in my own corner, do my own things, smile and keep going. And then sometimes if something goes wrong, I wish time will make it go away. It doesn't. She will tell you, if we don't talk, it's not gone. Let's sit and talk. So, that's what we're going to learn. It's a long reading. We will not talk, take the 28 verses. That will be too much. Let's just go all the way to probably 13. Genesis 45, 1 to 13. I'm reading from NIV. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants. He cried out, "Everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptian heard Joseph cry. And Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph." Just pause and think about the gravity of that statement. I am Joseph. Now, what makes all this reading so exciting is the first question this guy is asking. Is my father still living? Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, this is heavy. Joseph is attached to his dad. Joseph is torn from his dad. Joseph is only 17. 22 years have gone by. He has lived far from his dad longer than he lived with his dad. And he's asking, is the guy I left still alive? Brothers and sisters, we live in a real world. We might develop muscles, develop bodies, develop our intellect, but there are certain things that you have never concluded. They pursue us regardless of what you've achieved. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer. Why? Because they were terrified at his presence. So the only victim was not Joseph. Even the evil brothers were victims too. Then Joseph said to his brother, "Come close to me." Another big one. This is the third trip they've made. Tell you there's a lot of symbolism. How many days Jesus was in the tomb? 3 days. Before salvation was written. The first time is the third trip that he's telling them, come close. He saw them the first time, he saw them the second time, but he never brought them closer. Because to bring closure takes a lot. And a problem can linger for 22 years. I have to wrestle with Joseph because as I'm reading and I'm praying and I'm meditating, I am seeing my own heart exposed to me. Because the people have never said, come close. And I wonder, will I ever say it? Because the wound is still gaping. Come close. When they've done so, he said, I am your brother. Are you seeing the progression? In verse 3, I am Joseph. Or verse 2, 3. In verse 4, I am your brother Joseph. It's not just a writer who thinks, it will be cool to make some amendment to my writing so that it can be a good piece of narration. The Holy Spirit is saying deep stuff here. I'm Joseph, but if we bring resolution to this, I am not just Joseph, I'm your brother Joseph. Daddy said, you see that issue that took place 22 years ago? I haven't forgotten. Oh, tell your neighbor, life is deeper than what you think. Why do you think husband and wife, after walking for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, they just grow apart? Because the things that a husband thinks the wife has forgotten, she hasn't. There are things the wife thinks, because we're still having sex and doing this, she's over it. She hasn't. You sold me. But now, what helps Joseph to survive this thing? Verse 5. And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry, not with me, but with yourself. Why? For selling me. Why is that? Because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. Until you put perspective to what people have done to you, you will never be free from people. Come on. So, we live lives at different levels. You can be bogged down for the rest of your life because all you see are people doing good, doing bad, being nasty to you, ugly to you, and then you are stuck for the rest of your life. Or you can enter as John entered in the presence of God and say, I am a prisoner, but I'm not a prisoner of Caesar. I'm a prisoner of Christ. The only thing that could set Joseph free is to find out beyond beyond my brothers, there's a God. Would you tell your neighbor there's a God? Oh no, your neighbor is, just speak to somebody, whoever can listen to you. Beyond all this humanity and people, there's a God. Come on, if you believe there's a God, give him praise in the highest place. I do believe with all my heart there's a God in heaven who directs the affairs of men. There's a God in heaven. Even when I'm troubled and beyond myself, God is saying, shh. I can use anything to bring about my purpose. I haven't forgotten what you did. But what you did have lost its sting because I understand behind all this, there's a bigger purpose. Let me tell you my secret. I've never said it. I shared with my wife many years ago, but never told her fully. what it was. There's a guy we loved with everything in us. We really, really did. And I'm in the States. I give him a call because he lives in America. I say, hey, buddy, I'm around. He said, what are you doing? I go, I'm at school. Then he did something that I've never expected from a friend. He laughed. Oh, so, yeah, congratulations, you're taking short courses. They also help people. Because back there he has finished his undergraduate in theology. But he didn't know I wasn't taking short courses, I was studying. On the phone I called my friend, my dear friend. And my dear friend, for whatever reason, he decided to be nasty. And that day, on that campus in Dallas, I decided I will study and finish everything that there's to be studied. That's the day I decided if there's a PhD, I'll do it. If there's something beyond PhD, I'll do it. It is in an ugly situation. Why? Because it's many, many years ago, but that sentence is still ringing in my head like he said it yesterday. Be careful what you say to people. Be careful the look you give at people. Be careful your smile, because sometimes you think I'm sarcastic, people don't pick it up, they pick it up quickly. Be careful when you are projecting yourself that they know all and these people are nothing, because it doesn't live. I remember you sold me. But what is taking the sting of the sale and hatred from me, it's because beyond all this, I'm seeing God. I will lie to you if I tell you, ever since I've been calling him, that was the last time I called a guy who was the best of the best friends I ever had. We're talking about 25, 26 years. Never called again. Because we don't understand that we deal with proper human being, and it hurts. But if you are here today and you've been hurt, don't remain in that camp. The only way you can get out of it is when you say, beyond all this, there's a God. That's the deliverance. I'm looking at the mileage I've made in the program of PhD and everything else, and I'm going, maybe, just maybe, it took that for me to do this. Oh, even the short courses, they help. I'm thinking, my word, why? I called you. Why would you do this to me? 6. For 2 years now, there's been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. 7. Look at Joseph thinking. He's driving something deeper. Because he says this in verse 5, he says this in verse 7, he says it in verse 8, he says in verse 9. When someone repeats, I'm seeing myself in Joseph. My wife knows if something bothers me, I really talk about it nonstop. I think Emmanuel have taken from me. She just says it again and again. If I stop talking about something, so its sting is gone. But if you see me going, then my soul is still wrestling with this. And Joseph is saying in verse 7, but God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So, It was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household and ruler of Egypt. 3 things. That's another study. 9. Now, hurry back to my father. Do you see this? Is my father still alive? Go back to my dad. This guy, even if it have been 22 years that have gone by. Now, if he was sold at 17 plus 22, it gives you what? Come on, people who went to school. So Joseph is a 39-year-old boy. He's missing his dad. There are people and things that you miss for a long, long time. Now I went back to my father and said to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. He still longs for his dad. You shall live in a region of Goshen and be near me. Listen to the saying of this boy. Man, it's just amazing stuff. You, your children and grandchildren, your flocks, herds, and all you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will come to destitute. Otherwise, you will perish. You can see for yourself, and so can my brother Benjamin. Look, all these are things that pops up from this. You, my big brothers, you can see this. But my brother Benjamin, that was, his blood brother and stuff, same mother and mom. So there's a lot we can say. That it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father, 3rd time. Tell my father about the honor accorded me in Egypt and about everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly. Did you notice that even at our age, many times you do things for the approval of a parent? That if dad doesn't celebrate me, I'm really, really not okay. If mom doesn't celebrate. And sometimes you even take a risk of studying things that you're not passionate about, simply because dad wants me to do this. Bishop, what are we going to be talking about? Thank you for asking. I want to talk on a topic, simply put, roping your nearest and dearest relations. Rope in your nearest and dearest relations. The term to rope in is basically either coercion or persuasion, do whatever so that someone can join you or join what you're doing. We have 2 types of relations. Someone nearest to us. That's the whole idea of the Good Samaritan. Who is my neighbor? And God says, whoever you meet is your neighbor. And then we have the dearest. That's family relations. So God is telling us today, whatever you do, don't forget to rope in the nearest and dearest people to you. The premise of our thinking is very simple. Perfect people view the privileged position as the means of empowering those who are nearest and dearest to them. Take a minute to think about the profundity of this statement. Now, when the Bible talks about perfect, the theology of perfection is not flawless, faultless. If you go that way, then you haven't understood. The theological view of perfection is maturity. Hebrews 5 talks about those who are mature know how to distinguish the right from the wrong. As you mature, you begin to understand certain things about your privileged position. It could be plenty in terms of prosperity, but could be also you are saved. And this is what I want to spin. Being saved is already a privileged position. Many of us will go to hell, but we hold the key because God is saying, now that you are saved, help other people to be saved too. That's why Ramah exists. Ramah is a place where people are equipped to know God so that they can go make God be known as well. If you sit around me, I make a lot of noise around evangelism because I believe strongly in the word of Bonke, a church that do not win the lost is lost itself. I think it was John Ortberg who put even a bigger problem to that issue. He said, if you want to know if your church is growing, check how many people receive Christ, how many people you baptize. The real level of growth is people who come here that have received Christ and people who got in the water for the first time. Otherwise, it's just transfers of members from one community to the other. That's not church growth. And if you put it under that light, many of our churches don't grow because we don't rope in those who are nearest and dearest to us. Evangelism in a church is not a program, it's a lifestyle. A church must evangelize to be church. So, let me go quickly through this labor, and then we'll see. Let's start with the issue of beautiful story, because we will never be able to rope in people if we don't understand where we're coming from. Right? Why is this story of Joseph so beautiful? One, it's because it's a story of a loving, sovereign God. Hallelujah. That's the starting point of everything called Christianity. Until you make peace that God, one, is sovereign, but two, is in his sovereignty, is loving. Christianity will be a problem to you. Now let me go quickly. Dissect the two words. The sovereignty of God talks about the absoluteness of his authority, doing what you want to do without questioning anybody, or without anybody questioning him. That's what makes God sovereign. He reigns supremely, sovereign. He does what you want. Nobody asks him, why did you do it? But if God we're dealing with was just a sovereign God, we will be in a very precarious situation. Because God can abuse his power and authority. Then the Bible balances our God. Say, God is not just sovereign, he's a loving God. Come on, you missed where you should have said amen, hallelujah, or something. That gives me peace. That God, who can do anything without anybody asking him for question, is guided and motivated by love. Which means whatever he does, God is concerned with one thing. How does it benefit my people? Are you with me? So therefore, I have made peace with myself. That whatever the Lord allows in my life, whether I understand it or not, ultimately, it will benefit me. If I let him do what he does. Let me go back to my story with my friend of many, many years. We did a lot of stuff together. Now, it's a nasty word. Maybe he did it purposefully. I don't know. I don't know what drove him. But if that is the motivation God was going to use to take an old man to still roll up his sleeves and then spend inordinate amount of time just reading and studying, it was good. It was good. It was good. Every time we hit a moment of crisis, my wife will always remind me, as ugly as the crisis is, it's not the main issue. The main issue is if we don't learn anything from this. Brothers and sisters, I came to encourage you. Christianity will never be lived with understanding God fully. Because He's sovereign, there are things that are going to shock us all the time about God. Always. Now, when you read the story of Joseph, chapter 37, and then going, you will just go, okay, Joseph was sold by his brothers. But you have to go and read it again in Psalm 105 for you to understand the gravity of the situation, because the Bible declares he was in shackles. He was chained around his neck. So Joseph didn't enter Egypt like someone say, oh, okay, we're selling him. He entered with chains and shackles. How can a 17-year-old, when his emotion and everything is being formed and reaching its peak, ever forget that I looked my brothers right in the eyes and they didn't care? We all know last week was a terrible week, and the week before with the issue of SAF2 and Nehahu and all these things. And then the journalist is pushing this guy from one of the unions. Do you think you're an essential service? You're working at hospital. Do you think it's okay for people to die simply because you want more money? Then the guy says, you white journalists, you grew up with food and everything else you don't understand. Listen, whether we work or not, there are casualties. We want more money. If they have to die, let them die. Life is about from which side you're reading it. So the sovereignty of God is the biggest trouble in Christianity, because God, in His freedom to do what He does, it baffles us. God, if you're so powerful, why do you let me go through the emotion of being thrown in the fire? Because beyond the fire, I want to convince an evil guy that there's no God at my level. But we have the benefit of hindsight. But Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, God didn't tell them, don't worry, you will find me in the fire waiting for you. No. When you read your Bible and you think it's just something God have, mashed together to impress and so that it's a beautiful Sunday service, it's so emotional. First of all, they say they were only with the underwears. Imagine exposed. These are not kids. These are 21-year-old boys. At the prime of their life, when they're conscious of the manhood, you are left publicly with only your underwear. And they didn't have this fancy underwear we buy at Markham's today. There was funny thing. And then you say, God is good. But look at the balance these boys bring. And they're only 21. Every time I organize with the Bible, I tell my wife, but these are the lives of kids. Why are they getting it and at my age I'm still struggling? They say, we know God is capable of handling things as you want. But you also know sometimes He wishes to do things in His own way. So whether He delivers us because you know He can do it, or He chooses not to, we will not bow. Can I be okay when God decides He will honor His life by not giving me what other people have? Will you be okay when you don't have any title to your name, any car, any house to show, yet you know you are not sinning, and the people who have it want to prove to you that the reason they have it is because they're spiritual? Because that's the weakness of charismatic movement. We equate houses and cars with God approval. I learned something from one of my mentors who have gone to be with the Lord. He said, Tshalo, we're to never forget that when Moses disobeyed God, water came out of the rock, but he never saw it. Then he said the reason why God allowed water to come out of the rock, it wasn't because of Moses' obedience, but it was his love for the millions of people who were thirsty. He said in ministry, there are times where God uses you not because of you, but because of them. So those are things that they've never left me. God is sovereign. But you know what balances my soul? In his sovereignty, is full of love. You will not allow something that if I allow him to finish what he does, I will end up saying he was right. But why is this story so beautiful? Because it's not just a story of a sovereign Lord who is loving. It's the story of a blessed individual added by God to his story. Hallelujah. The story of Joseph is amazing because I'm learning that this sovereign loving God from time to time enroll us to his story. By the way, for those who don't know, the name Joseph means added by God. They have two dimensions to it. Rachel, the mother, was barren. She wasn't giving birth, and then she tried the best, didn't work out. And it's only later on when, the big brothers are really, really old that Joseph came into being. And as he grew up, Benjamin came, and then as she was giving birth to Benjamin, she died. So Joseph, at a tender age, saw misery firsthand. That's why he kept asking, where is my brother? So I approach ministry differently. Are we together? Everything has changed in my life. That whenever God gives him an opportunity to serve at any capacity, I'm going, God is adding me to his story. It doesn't mean if I'm not around, God cannot handle his project. It simply means he loves me so much that he said, come around. Can you hold this? So therefore, serving is a privilege. Any mature Christian understand you can never be capricious with serving God. He can handle his own affairs. That's why the story of Joseph is beautiful. Because Psalm 105, if you go rummage into it, the Bible declares the reason why he brought him in shackles and everything else was a simple reason so that he can go ahead of them to preserve them from dying. Your presence can open doors for many more to receive Jesus. But why is this story so beautiful? Number 3, it's simply because it's the story of a community of liberation. Man, everything is so loaded, so heavy that, we can go for years and years talking about these things. Now, let me throw this on you. When Pharaoh heard that Joseph's brothers came, he sent the word in verse 16. Tell Joseph to send back his brothers with chariot and staff so that he can bring his father and his entire household. Okay? Now the question you ask yourself, why? Why would Pharaoh want them to come? Just think about you, how you feel bad if someone wants to come to your house. No, let's put it in open. Your cousin calls you, Kaz, can I come? I want to spend, 6 months at your house. 6 what? But this time around is 70 people. Pharaoh didn't even know how many. They were just said, bring everybody. There could have been 20,000. Well, I'll tell you. The obvious and first reason that many of us give, and you are not wrong if you give it, it's out of gratitude for what Joseph have done for Pharaoh and Egypt. But that is just one reason. Let me try the second reason, the most mature. Pharaoh was thinking, if Joseph is this way, and he came from there, by bringing the people like Joseph, we will have many Josephs in this situation. That's the thinking of Pharaoh. Do you know why we are called Christians? Because this earth believes if one Christ did what he did, if we can have more of the Christ scissors, and here you are. You show up in Cape Town. And your company thinks now that they have a Christian, this thing of Christ will continue. And you turn to be the biggest thief ever. Or if you don't steal, you turn to become the biggest lazy person the company have ever seen. I wanted to bring it to say ultimately the beautiful story is beautiful because heaven believes by touching Christ, he will release more of him on earth. You are the light. You are the salt. You are a seat on a hill. You are a lamp in a dark place. All these metaphors that Jesus is bombarding is going, can you live up to standard? You know who brought the best idea? Pharaoh himself. I will give to your family the best land. Because he knew that the most fertile land in Egypt was Goshen. If people work at your level and we give them the best opportunity, Egypt will never go hungry. You heard the story of Tshwane, right? The mayor went to forge paper. You heard it? Do you know that mayor is a pastor? Apart from being a PhD, and it's proven from vet, they went to dig, and all the journalists were saying, this guy is a man of a cloth. He's a guy who sleeps with his Bible on his chest. So now it's not about his studies, it's about, look what Christians do. Why are we letting God down? All the time. Let's begin to close this. A bad situation. I've said it already. One is the whole issue of complexity in a family. That's what made bad situation a bad situation. A loss of a mother, mistreatment of his brothers, mischaracterization by Potiphar's wife, forgetfulness by the butler, and beyond all this, God's silence. Talk about perfect storm. Number two, the complication that it produced in an individual. Let me throw this at you. And, I'm looking at this, I'm seeing myself in the mirror and I'm going, Lord, help me. But at the same time, it gives me so much thing to think. Stuff to think about. How many people know that when Joseph came out of jail and he helped Pharaoh, Pharaoh wanted to bless him? Remember? He gave him a wife. Remember? And then kids came, right? What was the name of her first child? Huh? No, Ephraim is the second one. Manasseh. What is the meaning of Manasseh? God have made me forget my pain and my trials. Right? That is chapter what? 41. Where is he meeting his brothers? 45. How does chapter 44 start? He cried so much that he could not control himself. Did he really forget? Did he really forget? Now, these are not easy stuff. That's why we need to be meeting for prayer, to deal with God on Wednesdays. We are doing so that our inner space can be healed by God. To call your child Manasseh doesn't erase your memory. It just can make you a decent, hurting person. Anger, grief, hurt, pain, shame, woundedness. These are things that you need to deal with. Let me wrap. What is the brave solution? I'm proposing to us what Joseph did. That's what God is asking us to do. The church can never move forward until these things are put in place. Joseph said, the only way I can deal with this is to bring them in. Are we together? Brothers and sisters, God is calling us, Christian members of Gospel Ramah Church, your siblings, your friends, your brothers, your neighbors, your fellow students, whoever you mix with, nearest and dearest to you, bring them in. You cannot be in a position of plenty and keep plenty to yourself. No. In this time, I'm using plenty not in terms of material blessing. I'm talking about you are saved. Use your salvation to bring other people into salvation. That's the story of Christianity. But number two, don't just bring them in. Build them up. Do you know that Joseph, all his life, all he did was to build his brothers up? All the way to chapter 50. He kept reassuring them. Don't just bring people, connect them with Christ, and abandon them. The port of contact is you. This discipleship thing we do is a good program, but I think the secret of discipleship, whoever brings you to Christ takes care of you. Why would you just dump me in the hand of someone and say, okay, you go disciple now, I've brought them to Christ? And then third and last, back them up all the way. That's the story of Joseph. That's what justifies a year of plenty. Let's see ourselves as added to the story of God, so that through us we can create a community of liberation. Let's acknowledge that you're dealing with some serious, deep-seated emotional issues that makes Christianity difficult to live. Therefore, let's meet regularly on Wednesdays. Like past Wednesday, I was moved by the intensity of seriousness of prayer. Yes, it will cost extra energy to come, but it's worth it. And once you are healed, let's make sure that 2023, we specialize in reaching out to the people who are nearest and dearest to us, so that the Christ we met, they can meet him too. Have you learned something today? So next time, before you call yourself Manasseh, think again. Our Father and our God, we appreciate and honor you that you have concluded our thought with you today. That true maturity is to understand that our position of privilege should be viewed as means to reach out to those who are nearest and dearest to us, so that they can also enjoy the same benefit.